My boyfriend cheated with my sister. I ruined both their lives and moved on. Sounds like the title of some trashy daytime soap opera, right? Except it happened to me. And let me tell you, the real-life version doesn't come with commercial breaks or convenient amnesia plotlines. Just pure, unfiltered betrayal that hits you like a freight train loaded with bricks. I should probably back up a bit. 3 weeks ago, I was just regular old Jen, marketing coordinator by day, girlfriend to Alex for 4 blissful years, and sister to Madison, my supposedly ride or die since the womb. The kind of boring normal that most people would kill for. The kind of stable I'd worked my ass off to build after our parents' messy divorce left Madison and me scrambling for solid ground. That Jen? She doesn't exist anymore. That Jen died the moment I opened our apartment door at 2:17 p.m. on a random Tuesday afternoon. I remember checking my watch as I turned my key, mentally calculating how many hours until Alex would be home from work. I'd left early with a splitting migraine, the kind that makes even blinking painful. All I wanted was our darkened bedroom, my prescription meds, and silence. Instead, I got sounds. Unmistakable sounds coming from our bedroom. You know that moment in horror movies where someone is about to open a door they absolutely should not open? That's what my body felt like, heart hammering against my ribs, breath caught somewhere between my throat and lungs, every instinct screaming at me to turn around and leave. But my feet moved anyway, like they were being pulled by invisible strings toward the hallway. I wish I could say my brain formulated some rational explanation. Maybe Alex came home early too. Maybe he was watching porn. Maybe anything other than what I found. The bedroom door wasn't even fully closed. That's the detail that still makes my stomach acid burn up my throat. They didn't even care enough to shut the damn door all the way. Time did that weird stretchy thing, where seconds expand into hours. I stood there, hand frozen on the doorknob, unable to process what I was seeing. My boyfriend, the man who'd promised me forever just 3 months ago on my birthday, tangled up with my sister on our bed. Our fucking bed, with the sheets I'd washed just that weekend. They didn't notice me at first. I didn't scream or gasp or make any dramatic entrance. I just stood there, watching as if through a pane of glass, like this was happening to someone else. The migraine pulsed behind my eyes, and strangely, I focused on Madison's hair. She'd gotten highlights since I'd last seen her. Caramel blonde, probably cost a fortune. I wondered if Alex had paid for them. Funny how your brain latches onto insignificant details when the big picture is too horrible to comprehend. Eventually, Alex saw me. His face did this cartoon-like transformation from pleasure to horror that would have been comical in any other context. He shoved Madison away so hard she nearly fell off the bed. Jen, it's not— I didn't let him finish that cliché. Didn't need to hear whatever bullshit excuse he was about to spout. I simply turned and walked out. Behind me, I heard scrambling. Madison's voice calling my name in that high-pitched, fake, concerned tone she'd perfected since childhood. I made it to my car before the shaking started. My hands trembled so violently I couldn't get the key in the ignition. Something was happening to my lungs. They seemed to have forgotten how breathing works. Black spots danced at the edges of my vision as my heart attempted to jackhammer its way out of my chest. A panic attack. Great. Just what this perfect day needed. I don't remember driving to Kira's apartment. Kira, my best friend since college, the only person besides my cheating boyfriend and backstabbing sister that I fully trusted. The universe's way of saying 2 out of 3 ain't bad? The next clear memory I have is sitting on her bathroom floor, hugging her toilet like it was a life preserver while my body emptied itself of everything I'd eaten that day. Kira didn't ask questions when she found me there. She just grabbed a washcloth, dampened it with cool water, and pressed it against the back of my neck. Then she sat cross-legged on the tile beside me and waited. When I finally told her, her face went through this fascinating range of emotions, shock to disbelief to a kind of murderous rage I'd never seen on her before. For a brief moment, I wondered if Alex and Madison's bodies would be found in a dumpster by morning. Part of me wouldn't have minded. My phone had been buzzing nonstop in my purse. I finally checked it. 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. Most from Alex, a handful from Madison. I didn't read any of them. Instead, I powered off my phone completely and dropped it back in my bag like it was contaminated. That night I slept in Kira's guest room, though slept is a generous term for what actually happened. I stared at the ceiling while my brain helpfully provided a greatest hits reel of moments with Alex and Madison. Every laugh we'd shared, every family dinner. Every time I'd gushed to my sister about how much I loved him, every time she'd smiled and said we were perfect together. Had they been laughing at me all along? How long had it been going on? Was I the punchline to some private joke between them? The questions circled like vultures, picking at the carcass of what had once been my life. Morning came with the kind of headache that makes you question whether being conscious is really worth it. Kira force-fed me toast and coffee, then sat across from me at her tiny kitchen table, chin propped on her fist. So what's the plan? Plan? I hadn't thought beyond surviving the night. Planning implied a future, and right now I couldn't see past the next 5 minutes. Kira's expression softened, but only for a moment. You have options, she said. You can forgive them, though personally I'd rather eat glass. You can pretend it didn't happen, which is basically just forgiveness with extra denial. Or you can make them regret ever breathing the same air as you. I almost smiled at that last one. Almost. The truth was, I wasn't ready to decide anything. My brain felt waterlogged, heavy with grief and betrayal. Kira seemed to understand because she didn't push. Instead, she offered me her shower and a set of clean clothes, simple kindnesses that nearly broke me all over again. I had to turn my phone back on eventually. The real world was still out there, waiting. My job, my apartment, my life, all of it needed attending to, whether my heart was shattered or not. When I powered up, the notification flood was immediate. 54 missed calls, over 100 texts, even a few emails. Desperation looks pathetic on both of them, Kira commented, glancing over my shoulder. I started with Alex's messages, scrolling through the expected progression. Denial. Jen, it wasn't what it looked like. Pleading. Please come home so we can talk. Anger. You're being ridiculous, it was one mistake. Back to pleading. I'm dying here. Please just call me. And finally, self-pity. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I love you. Madison's messages followed a similar pattern, with an extra helping of sister-specific guilt-tripping. We're family, we can get through anything. Family. The word tasted like battery acid. The emails were from work, blissfully unrelated to my personal apocalypse. Something about upcoming deadlines and meeting schedules. The normalcy was almost jarring. How could the world just continue spinning when mine had stopped completely? I need to get my stuff from the apartment, I finally said. Kira's eyes lit up. Want me to come? I can bring a baseball bat for ambiance. It was tempting, but I shook my head. This was something I needed to do alone. I texted Alex, the first communication since I'd walked out. I'll be by at 5 to get some clothes. Be gone. His response was immediate. We need to talk. I didn't bother replying. There was nothing to talk about that would change what had happened. No explanation could undo the image burned into my retinas. Alex wasn't gone when I arrived. Of course not. That would have required respecting my wishes, something he clearly wasn't capable of. He looked terrible, unshaven, red-eyed, wearing the same clothes from yesterday. Good. Jen, please, he started as soon as I walked in. I walked past him toward the bedroom. Our bedroom. The crime scene. I felt his presence behind me but didn't turn around, focusing instead on grabbing my suitcase from the closet and filling it mechanically with clothes, toiletries, my laptop. It was a moment of weakness, he was saying to my back. It didn't mean anything. It was a terrible mistake. Each word was like a needle under my skin, but I kept packing. He kept talking. Something about stress and drinking too much and Madison coming over to drop off something I'd left at our parents' house. The excuses blurred together into white noise. I just need you to look at me, he said finally, voice cracking. So I did. I turned and really looked at him, this man I'd planned to spend my life with. This man I'd trusted with everything, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just vast emptiness where love used to be. Are you finished? I asked. He blinked, clearly thrown by my tone. Because I am, I continued. I'm finished with you, with us, with all of it. You don't mean that, he said, reaching for my hand. You're angry and you have every right to be, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling or... I pulled my hand away before he could touch me. There's nothing to fix, Alex. You fucked my sister in our bed. That's not a broken plate you can glue back together. The crassness of my language seemed to shock him more than the rejection. Good old Jen, always so careful with her words. Another part of me that had died yesterday. I wheeled my suitcase toward the door, but he blocked my path. So that's it? 4 years and you're just walking away? Something snapped inside me then, a thin thread of restraint I didn't know I'd been clinging to. What exactly did you expect? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. That I'd forgive you? That we'd have a good cry and move past it? That I'd understand how difficult it must have been for you, poor baby, to resist fucking my sister? He flinched at each question, each word landing like a physical blow. What happened to till death do us part? He had the audacity to ask. I almost laughed. We aren't married, Alex. Thank God for small mercies, right? And if we were, I'd be a widow right now, because the man I loved is dead to me. I pushed past him, suitcase bumping against the doorframe as I left. He called after me, but I was already gone, mentally, emotionally, physically gone. Back at Kira's, I collapsed onto her couch and stared blankly at her living room wall. The initial shock had worn off, leaving behind something harder and colder. The tears wouldn't come anymore. I felt myself calcifying from the inside out, like a prehistoric insect trapped in amber. Kira watched me with concern. Should we order pizza and get drunk? She offered. Standard breakup protocol and all that. I shook my head. I'm not hungry. She sat beside me, shoulder touching mine. You need to eat something, and maybe sleep for real this time. What I need, I said slowly, the words forming even as the thought crystallized, is to make them feel exactly what I'm feeling right now. Kira raised an eyebrow. Now we're talking. But revenge wasn't really my style. I'd always been the peacemaker, the rational one, the person who believed in taking the high road. Even thinking about retaliation felt foreign, like trying on someone else's personality. Yet the idea had planted itself, a tiny dark seed that whispered of possibilities. The next day, Madison showed up at Kira's door. How she found me there, I don't know. Maybe Alex told her. Maybe she just guessed. Doesn't matter. What matters is that Kira opened the door, took one look at my sister, and started to close it again. Madison wedged her foot in the gap. Jen, please, she begged. I need to explain. Kira looked back at me, silently asking what I wanted her to do. I nodded once and she reluctantly stepped aside. My sister entered cautiously, like someone approaching a wild animal. She looked as bad as Alex had, mascara smudged, hair unwashed, designer clothes wrinkled. The highlights I'd noticed during the incident still looked expensive, though. Some bitter part of me hoped they'd been worth it. I hate myself for what happened, she started, voice trembling. It was a terrible mistake. We were both drunk and— Drunk? I interrupted. At 2 p.m. on a Tuesday? She faltered, caught in the obvious lie. Well, not drunk exactly, but I held up my hand, stopping her mid-sentence. I don't care about the circumstances, Madison. I don't care if aliens possessed your body or if you tripped and accidentally fell on my boyfriend's dick. The result is the same. She winced at my bluntness. Her eyes welled with tears, perfect drops that rolled down her cheeks without disturbing her makeup. Madison had always been an elegant crier. It was a skill I'd never mastered. You have every right to hate me, she whispered. But you're my sister. We share blood. That has to count for something. Did it count for something when you were screwing the man I love? I asked, my voice eerily calm. Did our shared blood make you hesitate even for a second? Her face crumpled. It was a mistake, Jen. A horrible, terrible mistake that will never, ever happen again. You're right about that, at least. She reached for my hands, but like with Alex, I pulled away before she could touch me. What can I do? She asked desperately. How can I make this right? The question hung in the air between us. How could she make this right? Was there anything that could undo what had been done, unsee what had been seen, unfeel what had been felt? Nothing, I said finally. There's nothing you can do. She started to protest, but I cut her off. But I can do something, I continued, the dark seed in my mind sprouting its first toxic leaves. I can make sure you both understand exactly what you've taken from me. Madison's eyes widened slightly, something like fear flickering across her face. Good. She should be afraid. They both should. You should leave now, I said, rising from the couch. And Madison? Don't come back. Don't call. Don't text. As far as I'm concerned, I'm an only child. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. With one last pleading look, she turned and left. Kira locked the door behind her. I stood motionless in the middle of the living room, feeling something shift inside me. The numbness was receding, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. The kind of clarity that comes with absolute certainty. They had destroyed the life I'd built, the future I'd planned, the trust I'd given. They had taken everything from me. And now I would return the favor. 2 days into my self-imposed exile at Kira's apartment, I realized I needed a plan. Not just any plan, a methodical, calculated blueprint for dismantling the lives of the 2 people who'd destroyed mine. Revenge isn't a word I'd ever associated with myself before. It tasted foreign on my tongue, like some exotic spice I'd previously deemed too dangerous to sample. Now, I was developing quite the appetite for it. You need to eat something that isn't processed sugar, Kira said, eyeing the empty ice cream container beside me on the couch. She'd been remarkably patient with my grief spiral, but I could tell her tolerance for my wallowing was wearing thin. "I need to destroy them," I replied, licking my spoon with deliberate slowness. Kira sat down, pulling her legs underneath her. "Love the energy, but maybe get specific?" "Destroy them" is giving supervillain monologue, not actionable strategy. She had a point. Vague declarations of vengeance might feel satisfying, but they wouldn't actually accomplish anything. I needed to be smarter than my anger. Calculating. Strategic. "What do they care about most?" Kira prompted when I didn't respond. The question was like flipping a switch in my brain. What did they care about most? Because that's what I needed to target. For Alex, it was easy. His career. He'd spent the last 6 years clawing his way up the corporate ladder at Westfield Financial. Senior investment analyst at 32, he'd reminded everyone of this accomplishment at every opportunity. His boss, Richard Hammond, was grooming him for a director position that would open up next quarter. Alex had already bought 3 new suits in anticipation. Madison was equally transparent. Her social standing, her carefully curated image as a successful lifestyle influencer with her 127,000 Instagram followers. Her brand partnerships with those clean-eating meal delivery services and sustainable clothing lines. The facade of perfection she'd constructed, one filtered photo at a time. "I need my laptop," I said, suddenly energized. Kira raised an eyebrow but fetched it from the guest room. As I opened it, she peered over my shoulder. "What exactly are we doing here?" "Research," I replied, opening a new document. "Know thy enemy and all that bullshit." I created 2 columns, Alex and Madison. Under each, I listed everything I knew about their vulnerabilities, their secrets, their pressure points. Information is power, and after years of intimacy with both of them, I had enough ammunition to start a small war. Under Alex. Panic attacks he hides from everyone at work. Prescription Xanax he's not supposed to mix with alcohol, but does. The creative accounting he did on his last 3 expense reports. The time he told me about deliberately tanking a colleague's presentation to position himself better for promotion. Under Madison. The nose job she swears is natural. The brand deals she's accepted payment for but never delivered on. The fact that her organic, plant-based lifestyle is a complete fabrication. I'd personally watched her devour a Big Mac in my car, begging me not to tell anyone. The secret credit card debt she's been hiding from our parents. Looking at the growing lists, I felt a strange sense of calm spreading through me. This wasn't just emotional venting, this was practical, tactical. "Damn," Kira whispered, reading over my shoulder. "You're not playing around." They didn't. That night I couldn't sleep. Again. But instead of replaying the betrayal on loop like I had been, my mind was whirring with possibilities. By morning I had the skeleton of a plan, not just for petty revenge but for something more. Comprehensive. "I need to get my own place," I announced over coffee. Kira frowned. "You know you can stay here as long as you need, right? No rush." "I appreciate that, but I need my own space to execute Operation Fuck Them Both Over." "That's what we're calling it?" Not very subtle. I'm not feeling particularly subtle these days. She couldn't argue with that. By afternoon, I'd found a small studio apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but it had decent internet and no memories. The landlord, desperate to fill the vacancy, let me move in that weekend with just the first month's rent and deposit. The universe was finally throwing me a bone. While setting up my new command center, a card table with my laptop and a very large bottle of wine, I made 2 important decisions. First, I wouldn't engage with either of them directly. No calls, no texts, no confrontations. Radio silence is unsettling. It creates a vacuum they'd fill with their own anxieties and assumptions. Second, this wouldn't be some impulsive, messy revenge. I would be patient, strategic, the kind of calculated response that unfolds so naturally they wouldn't even realize it was happening until they were already drowning. I needed allies. Not everyone. I wasn't building an army, just the right people in the right places, starting with Richard Hammond, Alex's boss. Getting a meeting with him wasn't difficult. I'd met Richard and his wife Elaine several times at company functions. They remembered me as Alex's lovely girlfriend, who worked in marketing. I sent Richard a brief email explaining that I was working on a financial literacy initiative for my company and would love his input, given his expertise. "Coffee, my treat," he agreed immediately. Men like Richard rarely turn down opportunities to appear important. We met at an upscale cafe near his office. I dressed professionally but warmly, the competent young woman seeking mentorship, not the scorned girlfriend seeking revenge. The distinction was important. Jennifer! Wonderful to see you, Richard boomed, ever the large personality. Although I was surprised to get your email. Everything all right with you and Alex? He's been a bit distracted lately. I offered a practiced smile. Actually, Richard, Alex and I have parted ways, but I've always valued your perspective, which is why I wanted to meet. His eyebrows shot up, but to his credit, he didn't push for details. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. What can I help you with? For the next 30 minutes, I asked intelligent questions about financial markets, nodding attentively at his responses. I wasn't faking interest. Finance had always fascinated me, something Alex had routinely dismissed. Leave the money stuff to me, babe. As our coffee cups emptied, I carefully steered the conversation. I've been re-examining my own financial habits since the breakup, I said, letting vulnerability creep into my voice. It's amazing how being with someone can blind you to certain inconsistencies. Richard leaned forward slightly. Inconsistencies? I hesitated, as if reluctant to continue. I probably shouldn't say anything. It's just, well, I handled our joint expenses and some things never quite added up. By the time we parted, I'd planted just enough seeds of doubt about Alex's financial ethics to warrant a closer look at his expense reports and client billings. I hadn't made any direct accusations, just expressed concerns. As a conscientious citizen of the financial world, Richard gave me his direct number. If you think of anything else that seems relevant, please call me directly. Seed planted. Madison required a different approach. Direct confrontation wouldn't work with her either. She'd spin it, play the victim, turn it into content for her followers. My sister and I are going through a challenging time. Family? More healing? More blessed? No, for Madison, I needed to target the foundation of her carefully constructed image. The easiest way? Through Olivia Reeves. Olivia was Madison's former best friend, until Madison borrowed Olivia's business concept for sustainable wellness retreats, repackaged it as her own, and launched it to her followers. Olivia had been devastated, but didn't have the platform or resources to fight back. I'd always liked Olivia, and had quietly maintained our friendship even after Madison's betrayal. We met for drinks at a quiet bar downtown. Holy shit, Jen. I heard about what happened. Are you okay? Olivia's concern was genuine, her hug tight. Getting there, I said, signaling the bartender for 2 wines. One day at a time and all that therapeutic garbage. She laughed, then her expression darkened. I wish I could say I was surprised about Madison, after what she did to me. She trailed off, the old hurt evident. Perfect opening. That's actually part of why I wanted to meet, I said, leaning in. I think it's time Madison faced some consequences for how she treats people. Olivia's eyes widened. What did you have in mind? By our 3rd glass of wine, Olivia was fully on board. As Madison's former closest friend, she knew where all the bodies were buried, the fake followers Madison had purchased, the photo editing apps she used to create her natural beauty, the brand deals she'd botched but covered up. Most damning of all, Olivia still had the original business plan Madison had stolen, with dated documentation proving the timeline. I've wanted to expose her for years, Olivia admitted, but I was afraid of looking bitter or vindictive. I raised my glass. Luckily, I've recently lost my fear of appearing vindictive. We clinked glasses, co-conspirators now. The next 2 weeks were devoted to reconnaissance and foundation building. I took a week off work, claiming personal issues, and used the time to document everything. I created spreadsheets, gathered evidence, built timelines, not just for Alex's financial irregularities or Madison's fraudulent business practices, but for every vulnerability I'd identified. My studio apartment wall slowly transformed into something from a crime thriller. Sticky notes, printed emails, photographs, all connected with red string. Kira, dropping by with takeout, took one look and whispered, "Holy shit, you've gone full beautiful mind." Maybe I had. But for the first time since discovering them together, I felt powerful, in control. While they were busy texting me apologies and leaving voicemails begging for forgiveness, I was systematically dismantling the scaffolding of their lives. I didn't hate them anymore. Hate requires emotional investment, and I was beyond that now. This wasn't about hot-blooded revenge, it was about cold-blooded justice. They had calculated that betraying me was worth whatever consequences might follow. I was simply ensuring those consequences were appropriately proportional. 3 weeks after the betrayal, I ran into Alex at the grocery store, unavoidable in a city this size. I'd known our paths would eventually cross, and had prepared accordingly. He looked awful. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped. My first instinct was concern, followed immediately by satisfaction. Good. Let him suffer. Jen, he breathed when he saw me, abandoning his cart in the produce section. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I regarded him coolly, maintaining precisely 3 feet of distance between us. I've been busy. Please, can we talk? Just for a minute? I'm falling apart without you. Part of me, a small weak part I was working to excise, wavered at the naked pain in his eyes. But then I remembered Madison's highlights glinting in the afternoon sun as she writhed beneath him, and my resolve hardened. I have nothing to say to you, Alex. I made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. But it was only once, I swear to God. Madison came over upset about some investment thing, and I held up my hand, stopping him mid-sentence. I don't care about the backstory. The plot twist is all that matters. Plot twist? You know, that moment when the protagonist discovers her boyfriend and sister are both irredeemable trash humans. Classic narrative device. His face crumpled. Don't say that. Please. I know what I did was unforgivable, but I'm still me. I'm still the man who loves you. No, I said, my voice calm and clear in the fluorescent-lit aisle. The man who loved me would never have done what you did. You're just a stranger wearing his face. I walked away then, leaving him calling my name among the organic vegetables. Several shoppers turned to stare. Let them. Public humiliation was the least of what he deserved. That encounter crystallized something for me. I'd been approaching this as a mission of destruction, but that wasn't quite right. Destruction is chaotic, messy. What I wanted was dismantling, precise, controlled, and ultimately more devastating. Alex and Madison had built their lives on carefully constructed foundations: his professional reputation, her social image. I wouldn't blow those foundations up. I would quietly remove the support beams, one by one, until the structures collapsed under their own weight. For Alex, Phase 1 was already in motion with Richard Hammond, but I needed more. Through some careful social engineering and one very flirtatious happy hour with Alex's IT colleague Devin, I gained access to Alex's work email. Nothing illegal, Devin just forgot to log out of the system while showing me pictures of his new puppy on his work laptop. Oops. What I found confirmed my suspicions. Alex had been doctoring client reports, showing better returns than actually existed. Not massively, just enough to make himself look like a financial wunderkind without raising immediate red flags. Classic Alex, cutting corners while maintaining plausible deniability. I anonymously forwarded 3 particularly damning emails to Richard Hammond from a burner email account called ethicalconcerns@gmail.com. No accusatory text, just the raw evidence with subject lines highlighted. For Madison, the approach was more multifaceted. Olivia had connected me with several influencers Madison had wronged, each eager to participate in what we were calling a market correction. But the real gold came from Madison herself, via her cloud storage. See, Madison had used my Netflix account for years, same password as her cloud storage, because my sister was nothing if not conveniently predictable. Inside, I found unedited versions of her Instagram photos, revealing the extensive manipulation she performed before posting. More damning were her brand contracts alongside evidence she hadn't fulfilled the terms, posting fewer times than agreed, failing to use required hashtags, misrepresenting engagement metrics. I downloaded everything, then sorted it into carefully labeled folders. Not for immediate use, timing would be crucial. These were weapons to be deployed strategically, not in a blind rage. Throughout all of this, I maintained my normal life. I went to work, met friends for drinks, even started yoga classes. On the surface, I was just Jen, processing a bad breakup. No one except Kira and Olivia knew about the elaborate revenge architecture I was constructing in my free time. 5 weeks after the betrayal, Madison showed up at my new apartment unannounced. How she found my address, I'll never know. Probably bribed the building manager. Madison was always liberal with other people's money when it served her purposes. I almost didn't answer the door. But curiosity won out. I wanted to see her face, gauge her state of mind, assess whether my behind-the-scenes maneuvers had started to affect her yet. She looked terrible. Like Alex, she'd clearly been sleeping poorly. Her skin, usually glowing from expensive treatments, appeared dull. Even her outfit, normally meticulously planned for any possible Instagram opportunity, seemed thrown together without thought. "You're alive," she said when I opened the door, relief palpable in her voice. "You haven't answered any calls or texts." Mom and Dad are worried sick. Are they? I asked mildly. Or are you worried about what I might be telling them? She flinched. Can I come in? Please? Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. My apartment was deliberately sparse, just the essentials, nothing personal on display. Certainly nothing revealing my extensive revenge planning, which was stored securely in a password-protected folder labeled Tax Documents 2017. Madison stood awkwardly in the center of the room, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. This place is cozy. Why are you here, Madison? She exhaled shakily. To apologize. Again. And to see if there's any way we can start to rebuild. You're my sister, Jen. My only sister. What happened with Alex was horrible and inexcusable, but family is forever. Blood is thicker than... If you say blood is thicker than water, I will literally scream. I interrupted. Save the Hallmark platitudes for your Instagram captions. She looked stricken. I'm trying here, Jen. I know what I did was unforgivable. Then why are you asking for forgiveness? Because you're family. Because despite everything, I love you, and I know somewhere deep down, you still love me too. Did I? I searched my feelings and found nothing but a cold, empty space where sisterly affection used to reside. Love requires trust, I said finally, and I will never trust you again. Never is a long time, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. Madison always cried pretty. Even now, her tears made her look like a tragic heroine rather than the villain she actually was. Not long enough, I replied. You should go. Jen, please! I said go. My voice remained controlled, but the steel underneath was unmistakable. Whatever you came here hoping to find, absolution, reconciliation, the sister who would forgive anything, she doesn't exist anymore. You killed her when you decided your momentary pleasure was worth destroying our relationship. Madison wiped her eyes, careful not to smudge her makeup. Even in emotional crisis, some habits remained. This isn't you talking. This cold, unforgiving person. This isn't my sister. You're right. Your sister was trusting, loyal, and naive. I'm none of those things anymore. I moved toward the door, opening it wide. Goodbye, Madison. After she left, I poured myself a generous glass of wine and pulled out my laptop. Madison's surprise visit had actually provided valuable intelligence. She was desperate to reconcile, which meant she was vulnerable. Emotionally raw people make mistakes. They act impulsively. They reveal weaknesses. I opened the file containing all Madison's influencer contracts and evidence of non-fulfillment. With methodical precision, I began drafting emails to each brand's legal department, presenting myself as a concerned marketing professional who had accidentally discovered some potential fraudulent practices. 6 weeks after the betrayal, everything was in place. The dominoes were perfectly positioned, waiting for the first push that would send them cascading. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, searching for some visible sign of how fundamentally I'd changed. But the face staring back appeared remarkably normal. Maybe a little thinner, with new shadows under the eyes, but recognizably me. Except it wasn't me, not the me from before. That woman had died in the doorway of her bedroom, watching the two people she trusted most betray her in the most intimate way possible. This new version, clear-eyed, unsentimental, ruthlessly efficient, had risen from those ashes. Tomorrow the dismantling would begin in earnest. The emails would send. The evidence would surface. The carefully constructed lives of Alex Marshall and Madison Taylor would start to crumble, piece by precisely calculated piece. And I would watch it happen, not with rage or hate, but with the cool satisfaction of justice finally being served. Day one of what I'd started mentally calling the reckoning began with me doing something completely ordinary, making coffee. There's something almost surreal about launching meticulously planned acts of life destruction while performing mundane morning rituals, like a hitman flossing before heading out for a job. I checked my watch, 8:15 a.m. By now, Richard Hammond would be settling into his corner office at Westfield Financial, logging into his email, finding the anonymous message I'd sent containing evidence of Alex's creative accounting and client report manipulation. I imagined Richard's face, first confused, then concerned, finally hardening with professional disappointment. Richard prided himself on running an ethical ship, a fact Alex had mocked behind his back more than once. Regulatory Boy Scout? He'd called his boss, while conveniently bending those same regulations whenever it suited him. By 8:30, I'd brushed my teeth and sent the second batch of emails, these to the legal departments of 5 different brands Madison had contracted with, complete with documentation of her failure to fulfill contractual obligations. Nothing accusatory, just, as a marketing professional, I thought you should be aware of these discrepancies. By 9 a.m., I was dressed and heading to work like it was any normal day. Because that's the thing about revenge. The best kind happens while you're living your life, not while you're hiding in a dark room cackling over a keyboard. At 11:37, my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "It's happening. Check Madison's IG." I waited until my lunch break to look. Madison had posted a tearful Instagram story, filtered, of course, to ensure her distress was aesthetically pleasing, about unexpected legal challenges and misunderstandings with brand partners. She didn't provide details, but the panic beneath her carefully controlled expression was unmistakable. Direct hit. At 2:14, Kira called. "Holy shit, Alex just got escorted out of his building." "Devin from IT just texted me," said Richard Hammond. Personally walked him out, with security flanking them. "Did Devin say why?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral despite the rush of vindication flooding my system. "Something about an internal investigation. Financial irregularities." Alex was apparently shouting about being set up. I allowed myself a small smile. How unfortunate for him. "Jen?" Kira's voice lowered. "Did you have anything to do with this?" "Me? I'm just a marketing coordinator trying to rebuild my life after a devastating betrayal. What possible influence could I have over a financial firm's internal investigations?" Kira's silence spoke volumes. "Though I suppose," I continued, "if someone were hypothetically to point certain authorities toward evidence that already existed, that wouldn't constitute setting someone up, would it? Just expediting inevitable consequences." "You're terrifying," Kira said, though I could hear the admiration in her voice. "Remind me never to cross you." I went back to work, focusing on a campaign presentation due the following day. Compartmentalization, a skill I'd perfected these past weeks. My coworkers had no idea that while discussing ROI metrics and content calendars, I was simultaneously orchestrating the systematic dismantling of 2 people's lives. My poker face had become impeccable. By evening, the initial shockwaves were spreading. Alex called 17 times. I didn't answer. Madison texted a novel's worth of increasingly frantic messages, vacillating between accusing me directly and begging for help with her total legal nightmare. I read them all but responded to none. The silence was part of the strategy. Let them flounder. Let them wonder. Let them feel the ground shifting beneath their feet without being able to find solid footing. That night, I treated myself to expensive takeout and a bottle of wine that cost more than I would normally spend. A small celebration for Phase 1's successful deployment. As I ate, I opened my laptop and proceeded to Phase 2. This part required direct action rather than behind-the-scenes maneuvering. I'd created a throwaway email account and compiled a meticulously documented file. Financial records, timestamp verified photographs, text message screenshots, and recorded conversations, all legally obtained in our one-party consent state, revealing Alex's professional misconduct. Not just the creative accounting I'd already exposed to Richard, but deeper issues. Insider trading tips he'd acted on, client funds he'd temporarily borrowed for personal investments, confidential information he'd shared with friends. I attached the file to an email addressed to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the State Financial Regulatory Board, and for good measure, the Ethics Committee of Alex's Certified Financial Planner Association. The subject line read simply, "Evidence of securities fraud and fiduciary misconduct by Alexander Marshall, Westfield Financial." I hesitated only briefly before clicking send. Alex had made his choices. Now he would face the consequences. For Madison, Phase 2 was more elaborate. With Olivia's help, I'd connected with 3 other influencers Madison had backstabbed during her rise to social media quasi-fame. Together, we created a collaborative exposé document detailing Madison's pattern of plagiarizing content, stealing business ideas, and manipulating engagement metrics to secure brand deals. We included before and after photos showing her extensive editing, screenshots of copied content with timestamps proving the originals belonged to others, and testimony from a former assistant about how Madison purchased followers and comments. The document wasn't meant for legal authorities. It was designed for something Madison feared much more: public exposure. Olivia had connections with a popular influencer watchdog account that specialized in calling out fraudulent practices in the industry. Ready? I texted Olivia. Her response was immediate. Born ready. Launch the missile. I sent the document. Within hours, the watchdog account began posting installments of what they dubbed #MadisonMisconduct, complete with visual evidence and first-hand accounts. By midnight, it was trending in our regional social media circles. Sleep came easily that night, dreamless and deep, the sleep of someone who has set events in motion that cannot be stopped. The next morning brought the storm. My phone exploded with notifications, texts, calls, emails, even LinkedIn messages. Alex and Madison had apparently realized I was behind their sudden respective implosions and were oscillating between rage and desperate pleas. From Alex, "What the actual fuck did you do?" The SEC, "Are you trying to put me in prison?" "This isn't funny anymore, Jen. You need to call them and tell them it was a mistake." From Madison, "My career is being destroyed. I'm losing followers by the thousands and NutriBloom just canceled our $30,000 contract. I know this is you. Mom and Dad are devastated. Is this really what you want?" I forwarded Alex's message to my lawyer friend Steph, who confirmed what I already knew. Once the SEC begins an investigation, it doesn't simply stop because someone claims they made a mistake. The evidence would speak for itself. As for Madison's message, I screenshot it and sent it to Kira with just one comment. Devastating enough to cancel her spring break trip to Tulum, or just devastating enough for an attention-grabbing post about weathering storms? Kira's response, "You are my hero. Terrifying, but a hero." By midday, the situation had escalated further. Madison's biggest sponsor, a clean beauty brand that had built an entire campaign around her authentic lifestyle, publicly severed ties, citing irreconcilable differences in brand values. 3 others quickly followed suit. Her follower count was hemorrhaging, her comment section overrun with accusations and questions she couldn't answer. Alex, meanwhile, had been contacted by the SEC for an initial interview and placed on administrative leave from Westfield pending the outcome of their internal investigation. His carefully constructed professional trajectory had been effectively derailed. I wasn't just watching from the sidelines, I continued feeding the flames. Anonymously, of course. When Madison attempted damage control with a tearful Instagram live session claiming she was being targeted by jealous competitors, I made sure screenshots of her most blatant content theft were circulated in response. When Alex told mutual friends I was pursuing a psychotic vendetta because I couldn't handle a simple breakup, I ensured those same friends received copies of the evidence I'd compiled. The beauty of it was I never had to fabricate anything. Every damning piece of evidence was real. Actions they had taken, choices they had made, rules they had broken. I was just making sure those truths couldn't be buried or explained away. 3 days into the reckoning, Madison showed up at my apartment again. This time she didn't look sad or contrite. She looked furious. "Open the fucking door, Jen!" "I know you're in there," she shouted, pounding hard enough to concern my neighbors. I considered not answering, but decided it might be useful to gauge her mental state in person. I opened the door but blocked the entrance. "You've ruined me," she hissed, mascara tracks streaking her face. Gone was any pretense of the composed influencer. This was raw, unfiltered rage. "Everything I've worked for, everything I've built, it's all falling apart because of you. Technically, it's falling apart because of you," I corrected. I didn't create fake engagement metrics or steal other people's content. I didn't fail to fulfill contractual obligations while collecting payment. You did those things. I just brought them to light. "You vindictive bitch," she spat. "This is about Alex, isn't it? You're punishing me because of one mistake." "One mistake?" I laughed, the sound hollow even to my own ears. "Madison, sleeping with my boyfriend wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Multiple choices, actually. The choice to betray me, to violate my trust, to disregard our entire relationship as siblings. And now you're facing the consequences of your choices. Just like I had to face the consequences of trusting you." She lunged forward suddenly, as if to physically attack me, but I stepped back and began closing the door. "Madison," I said calmly, "if you touch me, I will call the police and add assault charges to your growing list of problems. Think carefully." Something in my tone must have penetrated her fury because she stopped, breathing heavily. "You've changed," she said, her voice quieter but no less venomous. "You're not the sister I grew up with." "You're right. That sister died the day she walked in on you fucking her boyfriend. I met her gaze steadily. The woman standing here now doesn't forgive. She doesn't forget. And she certainly doesn't let betrayal go unpunished. With that, I closed the door in her face. Through the wood, I heard her sob once, then the sound of retreating footsteps. I leaned against the door, surprised to find my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer intensity of the confrontation. For a moment, I wondered if I'd gone too far, if this calculated revenge had changed me into someone I wouldn't recognize. Then I remembered the look on their faces when I'd walked in on them. Not shock or guilt, those would have come later, but pleasure. Selfish, heedless pleasure taken at my expense. No, I hadn't gone too far. I'd gone exactly far enough. The next day brought a new development. Alex, apparently deciding that Madison was somehow responsible for his predicament, confronted her publicly outside her apartment building. A neighbor recorded the entire explosive argument and posted it online, where it quickly went viral in our social circles. "You couldn't keep your fucking mouth shut, could you?" Alex shouted in the video. "You had to go crying to Jen about how we made a mistake, and now my whole life is imploding." Madison, her famous composure completely absent, screamed back, "My life is imploding, you selfish prick. I've lost everything. My sponsors, my followers, my credibility, all because you couldn't keep it in your pants. We both made that decision," Alex retorted. "But I'm the only one facing actual legal consequences. The SEC, Madison. Do you understand what that means? While you're crying about Instagram followers, I could go to prison." The argument deteriorated from there, with both of them hurling increasingly personal insults and accusations. At one point, Madison shoved Alex hard enough that he stumbled backward. The video ended with them storming off in opposite directions, leaving stunned onlookers in their wake. I watched it 14 times. Each viewing brought a new wave of cold satisfaction. They were turning on each other exactly as I'd anticipated. Solidarity and betrayal only lasts until consequences arrive. Then it's every backstabber for themselves. I downloaded the video and sent it to Richard Hammond, the SEC investigator handling Alex's case, and the influencer watchdog account that had been documenting Madison's downfall. No commentary needed. The content spoke for itself. 1 week into the reckoning, the dominoes were falling faster than I could track. Madison had lost over 70% of her followers. 3 brands were pursuing legal action for contract violations. Her attempts at damage control, first defiance, then tearful apologies, finally claims of mental health struggles, only dug her deeper into the hole of public disgust. The influencer community, never known for its forgiveness, had essentially excommunicated her. Alex's situation was even more dire. The SEC investigation had uncovered evidence beyond what I'd provided, suggesting a pattern of financial misconduct dating back years. Westfield Financial, desperate to distance themselves from the scandal, had officially terminated him. His broker license was suspended pending further investigation. Former clients were coming forward with concerns about their accounts. I watched it all unfold from a distance, never directly engaging but always monitoring. I'd set up Google alerts for both their names, created anonymous accounts to follow the social media fallout, and maintained regular contact with my network of informants, mainly Kira, Olivia, and a few strategically placed mutual acquaintances. The strange thing was, as their lives crumbled, I didn't feel the euphoria I'd expected. There was satisfaction, yes. Vindication, certainly. But also a curious emptiness, as if the energy that had fueled my revenge planning had burned out, leaving behind a cold, hollow space. "Maybe you need closure," Kira suggested over drinks that Friday night. "You've done all this from behind the scenes. Maybe you need a final confrontation to really put it to rest." Closure is a myth invented by therapists to keep their clients paying for extra sessions, I replied, swirling the ice in my whiskey sour. Says the woman who turned her apartment into a revenge war room. She had a point, though I was reluctant to admit it. Despite my methodical dismantling of their lives, I still hadn't directly confronted either of them about their betrayal. My revenge had been clinical, detached, perhaps too detached to provide the emotional resolution I subconsciously craved. The opportunity for that confrontation came sooner than expected. 2 days later, I ran into Alex at a coffee shop in a neighborhood I rarely frequented. I'd gone there specifically to avoid familiar places, yet there he was, hunched over a laptop in the corner, looking like he'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. Thinner, paler, with dark circles under bloodshot eyes. For a moment, I considered leaving before he noticed me. Then I remembered Kira's words about closure and decided to face this ghost from my recent past. I ordered my coffee and deliberately sat at the table next to his. It took him nearly a full minute to sense my presence and look up. When recognition dawned, his face underwent a remarkable transformation, shock to anger to something almost like fear. "Jen?" he said, her name barely audible. "Alex," I replied, my voice steady. "You look terrible." He gave a harsh laugh. "You'd know why, wouldn't you? Since you're the architect of my destruction." "That's giving me too much credit," I said, sipping my coffee. "I just exposed what was already there. You built the house of cards, I just provided a gentle breeze." His hands clenched on the table. "Gentle? There's nothing gentle about what you've done. The SEC is combing through every transaction I've ever handled. My reputation is ruined. My career is over. I'll probably face criminal charges." I studied him dispassionately. "Consequences are rarely gentle, Alex, but they are often deserved." "For sleeping with your sister?" he hissed, leaning forward. "This level of retaliation for one moment of weakness? This isn't just about you sleeping with Madison," I said, maintaining my calm despite the anger flaring inside me. "It's about who you are, who you've always been. The man who cuts corners and breaks rules and betrays trusts whenever it benefits him. The man who sleeps with his girlfriend's sister and then expects forgiveness because it was just one mistake." Alex's face flushed with anger, but something in my expression must have warned him against lashing out. Instead, he slumped back in his chair, suddenly looking defeated. "I never thought you were capable of this," he said finally. "This calculated destruction. You were always the kind one, the forgiving one. People change, Alex. Betrayal has a way of revealing what someone's truly capable of." I finished my coffee and stood. For what it's worth, I didn't fabricate anything. Every piece of evidence I provided was real, actions you actually took, rules you actually broke. If you weren't guilty, none of this would have worked. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firmly enough to stop me. "Do you hate me that much? Enough to destroy everything I've built?" I looked down at his hand until he released me. "I don't hate you at all, Alex. That's what you don't understand. Hate is passionate. It burns hot. What I feel for you is much colder, much more distant." I met his eyes. "You're just someone who made the mistake of underestimating me." Walking away from that encounter, I felt a strange sense of lightness. Not closure exactly, I doubted such a thing truly existed, but something adjacent to it. A corner turned, a chapter concluded. Madison proved harder to confront directly. Unlike Alex, who seemed to be spiraling into depression, Madison had pivoted to offense. She'd told our parents a version of events that cast me as the unstable, vindictive ex-sister, jealous of her success and determined to destroy her out of spite. Our mother, always closer to Madison, had tentatively reached out to me with concerned messages about getting help and letting go of anger. I didn't bother correcting the narrative. Let Madison have her delusions of victimhood. The evidence spoke for itself, and most importantly, the consequences were real regardless of the story she told herself. Instead of a direct confrontation, I opted for one final strategic move. Using the evidence I'd gathered about Madison's business practices, I contacted the 3 brands pursuing legal action against her and offered to provide witness testimony if needed. Not anonymously this time. Openly, as Jennifer Taylor, marketing professional and sister to the defendant. Word got back to Madison, as I knew it would. Her response came in the form of a scorched earth email that oscillated between rage, self-pity, and occasional moments of startling clarity. "You've won, okay? Is that what you want to hear? You've destroyed me. My career is over. My reputation is garbage. I'm being sued by multiple companies, and even my own family thinks I'm toxic. Congratulations on your perfect revenge. But you know what the worst part is? I can't even hate you for it because I know I deserve it. What I did with Alex was unforgivable. I betrayed you in the worst possible way, and now I'm paying for it. But did you have to be so thorough? Did you have to make sure I lost everything? I don't even recognize you anymore. This calculated, ruthless person you've become, it scares me. It should scare you too. I hope it was worth it. I hope destroying your only sister brings you the peace you're looking for. Goodbye, Jen." I read the email several times, analyzing her words with the detached precision I'd developed over these weeks of revenge execution. There was manipulation there, certainly. Madison had always been skilled at positioning herself as the victim, but beneath the self-pity, I detected something rare from my sister. Genuine regret. Too little, too late. I saved the email but didn't respond. Some bridges once burned should remain ashes. 10 days into the reckoning, I stood in my apartment surveying the remnants of my revenge war room, sticky notes with plans now executed, timelines now concluded, evidence folders now emptied of their damning contents. It looked like the abandoned headquarters of a completed military operation, which in many ways, it was. I began taking everything down, methodically removing each piece of my elaborate revenge architecture. As I worked, I reflected on the path I'd traveled. From devastated victim to calculated avenger, from trusting naivete to clear-eyed pragmatism, from loving sister and girlfriend to what exactly? That was the question I couldn't quite answer. Who was I now, in the aftermath of both their betrayal and my retaliation? I finished removing the last of the evidence from my walls and gathered it all into a cardboard box. Not to destroy, I wasn't that naive. This documentation would be preserved securely in case it was ever needed again, but it no longer needed to dominate my living space. The mission was accomplished. Alex and Madison had betrayed me, believing there would be no significant consequences. They had calculated wrong. In the process, they'd unwittingly transformed me from someone who would forgive anything to someone who would forget nothing. From a woman who avoided conflict to one who executed justice with surgical precision. As I closed the box containing the remnants of my revenge project, I realized something important. I didn't regret a single action I'd taken. Not the anonymous tips, not the evidence compilation, not even the coldness with which I'd watched their lives implode. They had made their choices, and I had made mine. The difference was I could live with mine. That night, I treated myself to an expensive dinner at the restaurant Alex and I had planned to visit for our anniversary. I sat alone at a corner table, ordered the finest wine on the menu, and raised my glass in a silent toast, not to revenge accomplished, not to justice served, but to the woman I'd become in the aftermath of betrayal, stronger, clearer, and finally, genuinely free. 6 months can change everything. Half a year after the reckoning, I stood in the terminal at JFK, passport in hand, watching travelers rush past like schools of determined fish. My flight to Barcelona would board in 40 minutes, a one-way ticket to my new life. The marketing agency's international branch had jumped at my transfer request. New city, new role, new beginning. Funny how endings become beginnings if you stick around long enough. I checked my phone one last time before international rates kicked in. 3 texts from Kira wishing me safe travels and demanding regular updates, so I know you haven't been kidnapped by a sexy Spanish con artist. One from my dad, who'd finally stopped trying to broker peace between his daughters and accepted that some fractures never heal. And one from Olivia, who'd become an unexpected close friend in the aftermath. Karma thanks you for your service. Now go live your life. I smiled and powered down my phone. The urge to check for messages from Alex or Madison had finally faded, a phantom limb pain I no longer felt. The last 6 months had unfolded like the final act of a particularly satisfying drama. Alex had ultimately pled guilty to 3 counts of securities fraud. The sentence was lenient as far as white-collar crime goes: 18 months in a minimum security facility, financial restitution, and a lifetime ban from working in the securities industry. According to mutual friends, he'd found religion in pre-trial detention. Born again, apparently. Good for him. Everyone needs something to cling to when the life they built crumbles beneath their feet. Madison's downfall had been less legally severe but more publicly spectacular. After losing all her brand deals and most of her followers, she'd tried several desperate rebrand attempts: wellness guru, Christianity influencer, even a brief, cringeworthy pivot to financial advice for women. Each failed more spectacularly than the last, her credibility irreparably damaged. Last I heard, she'd moved back to our parents' house and was working at a local boutique, selling the same designer clothes she once received for free. Our parents had eventually stopped pressing me to reconcile with her. Some betrayals can't be forgiven over Thanksgiving dinner, no matter how much turkey and denial you serve. As for me, I'd spent the first month after the reckoning feeling hollow. Victory without satisfaction. The revenge had been meticulously executed, the consequences aptly delivered, but the emptiness persisted. I'd expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt untethered, as if I'd spent so long defining myself by this mission that I wasn't sure who I was without it. That's when I realized revenge wasn't the end of the journey, but merely a way station. The real destination was rediscovering myself in the aftermath, not as Alex's girlfriend or Madison's sister, or even as the architect of their downfall, but simply as Jen, a woman who had survived betrayal, executed justice, and now deserved to build something new from the wreckage. So I did. I sold most of my possessions, keeping only what would fit in 2 suitcases. Applied for the international transfer I'd always been too comfortable to pursue. Leased my apartment to a quiet grad student. Cut my hair short in a style Alex would have hated, and Madison would have called too severe for your face shape. Started learning Spanish beyond the high school basics. Small steps toward a life defined by my own choices rather than others' betrayals. Final boarding call for Flight 1827 to Barcelona. The announcement crackled overhead, pulling me from my thoughts. As I joined the boarding line, my phone buzzed one final time. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won out. The message came from an unknown number, but I recognized the writing style immediately. I heard you're leaving the country. Running away, or finally moving on? Either way, I hope you find what you're looking for. Some part of me will always love you, despite everything. Maybe someday you'll find room to forgive. Madison, still believing herself entitled to my forgiveness, still positioning herself as the magnanimous one offering love despite everything, as if I were the perpetrator and she the wounded party. Some people never truly change. I didn't bother responding. Instead, I deleted the message, powered off my phone again, and handed my boarding pass to the gate agent. Enjoy Barcelona, she said with a professional smile. I intend to, I replied, feeling the truth of it settle into my bones. On the plane, buckled into my window seat with the Atlantic stretching endlessly below, I finally allowed myself to acknowledge the journey. Not just the physical one beginning now, but the emotional odyssey of the past 6 months. I'd walked in on the 2 people I trusted most betraying me in the most intimate way possible. I'd methodically dismantled their lives in response. I'd watched the consequences unfold without remorse. And now, I was choosing to walk away from the wreckage, not because I regretted my actions, but because I'd outgrown the need for them. There's a freedom in that kind of completion, a lightness. The revenge wasn't about making them suffer as I had suffered, though that had certainly been a satisfying byproduct. It was about restoring balance to a universe where they thought they could hurt me without consequence. It was about teaching them, and myself, an essential truth. I would not be betrayed without response. I would not be wounded without exacting a price. But lessons once taught don't need continuous reinforcement. The teaching was done, the accounts balanced. Now it was time for something new. As the plane lifted off, carrying me away from the city where I'd loved and lost and exacted my cold revenge, I felt the last threads of anger finally release their grip on my heart. Not forgiveness, never that, but something adjacent to peace. The knowledge that I had responded to their betrayal, not with helpless acceptance but with calculated justice, and having done so, could now turn my face toward a future unburdened by their presence. My boyfriend cheated with my sister. I ruined both their lives. And now, finally, I was moving on. Not as the person I had been before. That woman was gone forever, her naive trust shattered beyond repair. But as someone new, someone stronger. Someone who understood that love without respect is meaningless, that family without loyalty is just shared DNA, and that the best revenge isn't served cold, but rather savored warm in the glow of a life well rebuilt. The plane banked east, toward Europe, toward tomorrow. I didn't look back. I didn't need to.